Go! Okay, so you're probably wondering how to start your essay, your remembering an event essay. And part of it's going to involve you thinking back on an event in your life that matters to you and something that you're going to want to discuss, how it changed your life. Okay, well, this is the basic features of a remembered event essay, and you can find this in your book as well. I'm just going to walk you through it here, and we're going to start off with a well-told story. So basically what we're looking for in a well-told story is that we're entertaining and that we are having some kind of memorable experience that's being shared with the reader. One of the things that we're going to want to consider is building suspense. Well, how do you do that? Well, think on one of those detective movies that you've watched where a detective is going down a dark corridor and then comes upon a door and walks through and then sees a stairwell. This is how the director of a film builds suspense throughout a film. And as a writer, you'll be doing the same thing, especially in a remembered event essay. What you do want to keep in mind is that you want to use action verbs. There's a long list of action verbs, and I would suggest that if you are kind of wondering about adjectives and action verbs, you visit PurdueOwl.edu online. But you can consider, for an example, instead of saying the detective climbed the stairs, you can say the detective was climbing the stairs. There's a bit of a difference in that one shows that there is present action happening, that is climbing the stairs, versus climb the stairs, which was something that already had happened. So that's one way of thinking of it. Also, consider temporal transitions, leading the reader from one place through another. That's very important because it cues the reader forward through time and space. So consider how a character moves from one place to another and how the point of view also addresses time and space in an essay like this. All right. Okay, so speaking of transitions, we also want to be sure that we set our remembered event in a specific time and place. Also keep in mind that dialogue is going to be critical. I'm going to be looking at how you use dialogue, and I'll explain that in a moment. But for now, understand that when I'm talking about transitions, I'm talking about the way that you combine action verbs and transitional phrases in order to guide the reader through the reading. A lot of you will choose to write chronologically, and that's great, and there are other styles. Chronologically is probably the most effective way of writing an essay like this, and it's the most common, certainly. But you can feel free to experiment a little bit with it. I've had students write some really great essays not using chronological order, but I just want to stress that it has to make sense to the reader, okay, especially when you're moving us from one place to another. You want to make sure that the reader doesn't get lost from one place to the other. Now, again, here's a website. If you look at on here, the visit Purdue Owl for a thorough list of phrases. There's quite a bit of transitional phrases there and an explanation of how to use them as well. And I would suggest that you take a look at that if you want a little more guidance. It should be very helpful to you. Also, you have to consider that the reader wants to empathize or identify with the narrator. Okay, so one way to do that is through dialogue. And when I mean empathize is, we are always looking to connect with others through writing and through their personal stories. Well, this is going to be a very personal story, and perhaps someone reading it in a peer review or even myself may connect with some of what you are writing. And so one way we communicate that is through dialogue. Well, why is dialogue so important? Well, first of all, it moves the story forward. Okay, so that alludes also to the transitions. but it also reveals information about the characters in the story. Now, this little cartoon strip here, Calvin and Hobbes, some of you may be familiar with. We get to see the relationship with Calvin and his Uncle Max, and this tells us a great deal about their relationship. It also tells us a lot about Calvin's character, and it also tells us a lot about his Uncle Max's character, who seems to kind of, be a little bit smarter perhaps than his brother, Calvin's dad, and also seems to kind of relate a little more to Calvin than his own father does. So that's one way that dialogue aids us in following a story. Now, the next thing that'll come up in the basic features is the vivid description of people and places. Now, this is all about giving us very specific details, describing people, for example, describing places. And we'll talk a little bit more about vivid descriptions. We'll get into a couple of exercises in class. But for now, I want you to understand that this is more than just revealing what a person looks like. So you don't want to have like a laundry list if you're writing about a friend of yours or something. You don't want to say, well, he wore a red hat and he had long hair and she wore a dress. And that's all good and fine, but we want to know that that hat means something, or we want to know that that dress means something. Why did she wear a red dress? Does she normally wear a dress? Does he always wear that kind of a hat? Is it something that tells us something about them? Remember, these are people that are part of your life. And so we want to show that they are unique. We're all unique people, right? So we want to consider how we might describe them, not just to give the reader a mental picture, but we also want to reveal something about their character. And this little diagram here on the left, the character profile, this is very commonly used, and it's a very basic tool used by writers of fiction. Something some of you may see someday if you take a creative writing course. And it's very, very basic. Character profiles actually can go on for pages once you get into advanced writing. But this will just give you an idea of the kind of things you may want to consider when you're writing up your the people in your stories. Sensory images. Now, this is all about the senses, right? So the narrator sees this, the narrator hears that, smells, touches, tastes. It's all about using all of those senses, bringing them all together in order to recreate the time and place in the reader's mind. It puts them right there in that space. It's almost, I like to say, like having the reader right in the back of your eyeballs and looking out at this place. You want to try and do that as best as you can. And here we have a small list of some adjectives that are used to describe places. But keep in mind that this goes beyond adjectives. You're going to want to use senses to describe things that may not be visible or familiar. Sight, smell, sounds, feelings even. They all contribute to describing a place. Okay. Finally, here we have the big one. This is the big one. This is the autobiographical significance. And a lot of people get kind of hung up on this because they don't really understand how it works. And so here's just a small, a couple of pointers here on what we're looking for, what I'm looking for when I'm trying to determine the autobiographical significance of your essay. Well, let's consider for a moment, what autobiographical significance is. In a small phrase, okay, in just four words, I would say it's an analysis of the event. And actually, if I want to break it down even more, it's an atom split moment. It is the moment in this story where everything has completely changed in your life. You're giving me a story. It may seem insignificant to some people, but it is going to have a profound impact on your life, and it will change everything you've done from this moment on. Everything you've done will change. And people say all the time, well, I'm only 18 or 19, 20 or whatever. I don't really have anything significant to talk about. There's nothing, important that I've done or anything. Look, here's a perfect example of the significance of paper. Okay, so if paper has significance, don't tell me that nothing in your life has had any significance, okay? money has played an important role in human history. And not to say that you are going to be any less important or anything, but certainly there's something that you can write about in your life that has changed the way that you have viewed the world. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. It's that atom split moment. It's that moment that begins with just a small ignition, and then it turns into just a brighter flame, and then next thing you know, boom, the entire world just changes, and you'll never go back to being the same person you were. That's kind of what I'm looking for. The moment that everything changes, okay? Everything changes from this moment on, and you're not going back. I'll give you some examples in class. We'll talk about it a little bit more. But there are a couple things that I want you to keep in mind as you're writing these autobiographical significance. You never want to overstate the autobiographical significance, okay? For example, you don't want to close up your essay with, well, the reason that this event was so important, or, and that's the moment that my life changed. These are simply put just way overstated, and we don't want to do that. Instead, we're looking to somehow connect with the reader, give them some kind of emotional impact to connect with the story, with the people involved in the story, with the characters of the story. So we don't want them to walk away with this kind of generic, and this is why this was so important to me. We want to avoid that. We want them to connect to the story. So the best way to do that is see if you can have this autobiographical significance manifest itself somehow in the writing itself, through dialogue, through the description of a character, or something that will help stand out and really drive home the point about why this is so important. Now, some of the things you're going to want to consider avoiding. This is just my own personal advice to you. It's been my experience in the last few, in the years I've been teaching this course, that generally speaking, people don't write about death very well. Often what happens is people end up writing eulogies, or they write these really long stories about the death of someone in their family, and the focus gets switched from them to the family member. And that's not good. We don't want that. Sports is another thing you may want to avoid. Why not sports? Well, because oftentimes what people will do is write about the event, and again, they lose focus on themselves. Or if they do write about themselves, it's kind of written in this, the style where they're giving you a sports announcement. Well, then I kicked the ball to this guy, and then he kicked it back to me, and then I kicked it, and then all of a sudden, goal at the end of it. Well, that's not really what I want, okay? That's not what I'm looking for. Violent and criminal activity, well, that has a lot of problems with it. If you write about things that may incriminate you or something like that. And ultimately, I want you to feel comfortable about what it is you're writing with and what you're sharing, because other people will be reading this. So you may want to avoid all of these things, just because I haven't had too much success with students in the past. Now, keep in mind, this is a really good piece of advice. Write something you would like to read. What is it that you would like to read in one of the other folks that's writing this essay? What would interest you to learn about somebody else's life? What could you connect to? Okay. I think that that's a pretty solid piece of advice, that most people, that when they write this essay, when they take this piece of advice to heart, they end up writing some really, really decent essays, because they enjoy it, okay? Because they're writing about something that they enjoy, because it's something that they would enjoy. Okay, so keep that in mind, and above all else, I want you to have fun with this unit. It's usually one of the more successful units for all the students. So I hope that you read those essays really closely, do the homework, and you should be fine. We'll talk more in class. And please, if you have any questions on this PowerPoint, the time to bring them up will be in class or my office hours. Bye now. See you in class.